Coming up, the last week of the regular season for the NFL certainly lived up to the hype, and now the playoff matchups are set. We'll tell you who's in and who's out right now on Locked On Now.
The biggest games, the best performances, expert analysis. You are Locked On Now.
Welcome in. You're listening to Locked On Now, local experts on the biggest stories throughout the NFL. I'm your host, Kainani Stevens. Thank you for making Locked On Now your first listen every single weekday. Our Locked On NFL hosts are here. They're going to tell you everything you need to know from the final week of the regular season. So let's get right into it with our biggest game that came up on Sunday night in Vegas.
The biggest game.
An absolute barn burner in Sin City. Basically, anybody that won this game was going to head to the playoffs. Even a tie would have sent both teams to the playoffs. But of course, the Raiders took it right down to the final seconds of overtime and took down their division rival in dramatic fashion. Locked On hosts break down an instant classic to end the regular season.
Well, Chargers fans, it's hard to find words after a game like that. This is Daniel Wade here from Locked On Chargers, coming to you after the Chargers' heartbreaking 35-32 defeat to the Las Vegas Raiders in overtime, eliminating their chances of making the playoffs in a game that was a few seconds away from being a tie that would send both teams into the postseason. The Chargers give up a big run on third down with the Raiders trying to tie the game, and the run defense comes back to haunt them, and they miss out on the playoffs in Justin Herbert's second season. But what a miraculous comeback from Justin Herbert and company, and what grit and determination shown by number 10 in this game. As long as he's the Chargers quarterback, they have a bright future. I mean, a 4th and 21 touchdown with the game on the line to Josh Palmer. With no time left in regulation, he finds Mike Williams for the game-tying touchdown, leading the team all the way down the field. And there were some lapses on defense and special teams that are going to haunt the Chargers in this one. But as long as they have Justin Herbert as their quarterback, the future is going to be very bright. But for our full game breakdown and what's next for the Chargers, make sure to subscribe to the new Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and find the show for free on all platforms wherever you get your podcasts. Your team every day.
The Cardinals had a shot at the NFC West title with a win over the lowly Seahawks, but a slow start came back to bite them. Locked On Cardinals breaks down the regular season finale for Arizona.
The San Francisco 49ers did their job. They beat the LA Rams in OT. Could the Arizona Cardinals take care of business on their end to win the NFC West?
No,
they can't. They lost.
No.
They blew it. They blew it, Alex. They fell to the Seattle Seahawks, who entered the game with just 6 wins, 38-30, and just slipping through their fingers was their chances at an NFC West title, and a home playoff game. Neither is happening for them. What went wrong on Sunday for Kyler Murray and crew?
Somebody forgot to tell Cliff Kingsbury to have his team ready for 60 minutes and not just 30. The Cardinals absolutely mailed it in the first half. After the strip sack, the return for a touchdown by Zach Allen put them up 7-0 within the first 12 seconds or so. The Cardinals completely mailed in the next 29 and a half minutes. Sure, the game was close, but when you're looking at the Rams up 17-0 at that time, I guess it seeped in like, well, you know what? The Rams are probably going to win, so you can take the first half off. That's the story of this, not the final score. The fact that the Cardinals didn't come ready to play against a team who had nothing to play for when they had the NFC West on the line.
The last undefeated team, they were at 7-0 at one point. They were at 10-2, have probably the most questions going into a playoff game of any of the remaining teams in the NFL right now. Only maybe silver lining in this, James Conner found the end zone for the 17th and 18th time of the 2021-2022 season. It's Bo Brock, it's Alex Clancy. We're previewing the Rams-Cardinals playoff game all week long on Locked On Cardinals. Check us out.
The Tennessee Titans finished the season strong, and the win secured them a much-needed bye week as they secured that number 1 seed in the AFC. Locked On Titans breaks down that win.
Tyler Rowland here, host of the Locked On Titans podcast, with my instant reaction to the Tennessee Titans' 28-25 victory over the Houston Texans. The Titans definitely increased the heart rate of their fan base by making this one close in the second half. The Titans were up 21-0 at halftime, and then Davis Mills led a furious comeback attempt for the Houston Texans. But at the end of the day, Ryan Tannehill put the team on his back, made some key plays in the second half, and got the Titans the victory that they so desperately needed. They now clinch the number 1 seed in the AFC. They will have a bye and automatically advance into the final 8 teams in the postseason. A monumentous accomplishment for the Titans this year, considering rostering over 90 different players, missing their 2 best offensive weapons for a majority of the season. Just a testament to the toughness and the preparation of Titans head coach Mike Vrabel, who absolutely should be the NFL's Coach of the Year. For more analysis, make sure to check out the Locked On Titans podcast on whatever platform you do stream. And thank you for making the Locked On Titans podcast your first listen every day.
Coming up, more drama across the NFL as we get the final playoff picture in Week 18. You're listening to Locked On Now. Today's edition of Locked On Now is brought to you by Built Bar. It's the new year. That means New Year's resolutions. For some of us, that means getting a little bit healthier in 2022, and Built Bar can help you do that. It's low calorie, low carb, low fat, even low sugar, but high in protein, and they taste great. More importantly, they have tons of different flavors that come out every 2 to 3 days, and they're made with 100% real chocolate. So it doesn't feel like you're eating diet food at all. You're going to want to head over to built.com, use promo code LOCKED15. You'll get 15% off your order. So just make sure you use that promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off your order at built.com. Welcome back to Locked On Now NFL. I'm Kainani Stevens. More playoff implications for the league as teams were fighting to play on Wild Card Weekend.
Let's go around the league.
Now, the Green Bay Packers had already locked up the NFC's top seed before their game on Sunday, and Green Bay did end up losing to the Lions, but Locked On Packers is not too concerned about that, and they've got a little bit to discuss about what they'll deal with on their week off.
David Bakhtiari and Josh Myers returned. Devontae Adams is your new franchise leader in a single season for receiving yards, and Jordan Love threw a touchdown pass. Did anything else happen? I don't think so.
The Saints got a win over the Falcons, but they came up just short on their playoff push. Locked On Saints says despite the disappointing end to the season, that the future is bright for New Orleans.
The New Orleans Saints will miss the postseason, but there's so much to look forward to with this franchise. I'm Ross Jackson, host of the Locked On Saints podcast. The New Orleans Saints handled their business in Atlanta with a 30-20 win over the Atlanta Falcons. Cam Jordan extended his career sack record to 23 against Matt Ryan. Taysom Hill was unfortunately injured, but Trevor Siemian came in and handled business. Traquan Smith looked great, and the New Orleans Saints continued to take the ball away from that Atlanta Falcons team to get them that big victory that they needed. Unfortunately, they didn't get the help that they needed from the Los Angeles Rams over on the West Coast. Matthew Stafford throwing a game-sealing and game-losing interception in overtime. So the New Orleans Saints won't be headed to postseason play this year for the first time since 2017. However, there's still a lot to look forward to with this team. We've seen nothing but resilience with everything they've had to navigate, all the adversity that they have had to find a way to get past throughout this season. They still end with a winning record at 9-8, second place in their NFC South division, and certainly will be looking to make the adjustments, improvements, and additions over the course of this offseason to get back to number 1 in the NFC South in 2022. For more on this New Orleans Saints win, what happens next, and where they head after this, we got you covered every single Monday through Friday over at the Locked On Saints podcast on all podcasting platforms and on YouTube as well. Part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
In a win-or-go-home scenario for Indianapolis, the Colts absolutely laid an egg against one of the worst teams in the NFL. On the other hand, though, Jacksonville showed up and showed real promise in a game that didn't matter much except for having pride on the line. Locked On Jags recaps an impressive win after a disappointing season.
I'm Tony Wiggins with Locked On Jaguars. A rare victory for Jacksonville on the final day of the 2021-22 season as Jacksonville knocks the Colts out of playoff contention with a 26-11 victory. Best half of football, best game of football we've seen from Trevor Lawrence. Best game of football I think we've seen from the front seven this year on defense with a total of 6 sacks. They harassed Carson Wentz from start to finish all day long. They didn't clown around in this one, even though the fans came out in their clown uniforms and made a statement to Shad Khan that they want more. Guess what? They still showed up, and it was a good crowd today at the stadium. Jags win 26-11. Now we just wait to hear on the GM and the coaching search.
Ben Roethlisberger isn't ready to hang him up just yet. The Steelers battled hard for a win over the Ravens and a spot in the AFC postseason. Locked On Steelers has more on an impressive showing from Pittsburgh when they needed it the most.
The Pittsburgh Steelers do the unthinkable. They get the win and they get the help from the Jacksonville Jaguars in the 1 o'clock games. I'm Chris Carter of the Locked On Steelers podcast. This was a spectacular fight through the end. Steelers beating the Ravens 16-13 in Baltimore. So many things kept happening in this game. The offense looking lifeless in the first half. They get a single field goal. The defense forces 3 turnovers and gets the turnover on downs. They hold Baltimore to a field goal at the end to force overtime. Then they get a stop in overtime to allow Ben Roethlisberger the chance. He gets 2 back-to-back 3rd down conversions, then a 4th down conversion to get the Steelers closer. Najee Harris getting them even closer with a 15-yard run. That gets them in range for a Chris Bodwell chip shot field goal. What a true character win as the Steelers finish the regular season with a winning record, 9-7-1. They are most likely headed to the playoffs. They still need a winner to come out of the Chargers-Raiders game. But to be clear, it would have to be a tie for them to not make the playoffs. In all likelihood, they are in. We'll be covering that and much more on the full episode of the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Carter Critiques. And you can also find this show on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Odyssey, and YouTube.
The defending champs finished off the regular season with a flourish. They clinched the number 2 spot, and they now have a meeting with the Eagles in the playoffs. Locked On Bucks breaks down the dub and previews the playoffs.
James Yarko here from the Locked On Bucks podcast, talking about the Buccaneers finishing their regular season with an absolute dismantling of the Carolina Panthers, winning 41-17 in spite of the slow start where the Buccaneers basically didn't have the ball except for a 3-and-out in the first quarter. They rally and absolutely dominate Carolina. Mike Evans extends his NFL record for an 8th consecutive season to start a career with over 1,000 yards receiving. Rob Gronkowski gets 2 different $500,000 bonuses based on the incentives in his contract, and the Bucs get a little help from a former member of their team and a Hall of Famer. John Lynch's San Francisco 49ers beat the Rams in overtime, allowing the Buccaneers to become the number 2 seed in the NFC. They have a date next weekend with the Philadelphia Eagles in a Week 6 rematch, and the only road game that they could potentially play in the postseason would be if they meet up with the Green Bay Packers in the NFC Championship for a 2nd straight year. For more on this and all things Buccaneers, check out my co-host David Harrison and I on the Locked On Bucks podcast, free and available on all platforms on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
That's a wrap for us today. Thank you for making Locked On Now your first listen every single day. For more on the National Football League and your team, make sure you check out Locked On NFL and your team's Locked On podcast. I'm Kainani Stevens. This has been Locked On Now.